In number 4, we have a square root function, and we want to find the inverse of that. So start off by switching the x and the y, and solve for the new y. So we're going to square both sides. X squared equals 3y minus 1. Add 1 to both sides, and then divide both sides by 3. So we get 1/3 x squared plus 1/3. So that would be our inverse, or so you would think. This one has a little twist to it. Well, let's think about this. Our first graph is a square root function. And we should all know what that looks like, right? We have basically just a sideways parabola. I'm sorry, half of a sideways parabola for our square root function. So it looks like this. But then if we look at our inverse function, we get a parabola. Well, problem with this is that if we have a parabola here, that's going to give us this full shape, full U-shaped. Remember, this was only half of a sideways parabola. And this should be the reflection over that line y equals x. So really, if we just reflect this part, all we should get is that right half of the parabola. This other part is not part of our inverse. It shouldn't be. If we leave our answer like this, that includes that left half of the parabola, and we shouldn't do that. So in this case, we have to make a little stipulation. We have to write that it's going to be this, but x has to be greater than or equal to 0. And really, for this one, it again boils down to what we're doing. We're switching x and y in the function. So our original function, if you look, the y value always has to be positive because of the square root. And so y value, if we're looking at like the domain and range, well, the range is all the y values of this function, and the y would have to be greater than or equal to 0. In our inverse, we're switching x and y. So really, if y is greater than 0 in our original function, in our inverse, the domain would have to be that x is greater than or equal to 0. So that's how we can get this. Here, this has to be greater than or equal to 0. So our domain of our inverse has to be greater than or equal to 0. So this is something that you have to keep in mind whenever you have a square root function.